So aesthetics and conventions. Okay. So since we're now delving into art and culture, one of the books that has influenced my view of photography and art and culture and gender has been this book. So I read this book when I was in college. It was part of our research about blindness. So interestingly, among all the competencies that we were trained in college, one of my strengths was photography. However, when we were going to do our thesis, I decided not to do photography. I decided to do a screenplay. So one of the reasons was that I was affected by this book, and I had so many questions on what photography stood for in relation to gender, modernity, the colonial gaze, all of those things. So just to highlight some idea here, one of the claims of this book is modern Western culture is the culture of the eye. So the idea here is that there is a certain antagonism, or there's a certain adversarial posture of the writer towards vision, or the visual phenomenon, or visualism, specifically visualism. And that surfaces here in this line, the visualist regime of modernity. So the writer associates modernity, that cultural period, that historical period. So again, those are two different things. They overlap, and even in naman sa art naman, there is modernism that's also different, no? But the fact is, it has genesis in the Western culture or the Western worldview. And similarly, that Western worldview of modernity was mostly visual. So in here, we can see the word regime. So regime in itself has associations. It is something hegemonic. It is something imperial. It is something authoritarian. It's something authoritarian, or at least we can say that there is an idea of imposition when we think of the word regime. There is someone who exercises control or power. So that's the associations you have with the word regime. So when you say visualist regime of modernity, just this line, this phrase of 4 words says so much already. And the heart of the book talks about gender politics and cultural constructs in relation to our senses. There is a discussion about why other senses have been relegated to the margins by visualism. There's an argument made wherein it is said that vision, or the experience of the visual phenomenon, has been the hegemon among senses. So it sees that through the history of art, or Western art, other kinds of experiences were relegated to the margins. It was all vision. So if you want to read this, so this is by Constance Classen. So that's the intro pa lang. So if you read it, ang dami, marami siyang sinabi about it. So maganda dito, it roots the idea of visualism and the embedded power structures that visualism facilitates. So in relation to this, I'm getting a screen cap from a video that Sandra Dance created in relation to Sausage Fest, no? But the good thing with how Sandra made the video was that as an academic, she substantiated the argument through credible knowledge, meaning she substantiated her arguments from journals, journals in aesthetics, journals in gender. So this is an excerpt from the video, and she got this from Roberta McGrather reading Edward Weston. So I just read it now. She does not look, pretends she is not being looked at, and at the same moment, we know very well that she knows. She is the one to be looked at without looking herself. The denial to look is also by implication the denial of a woman's access to the production of knowledge. So this segment of Sandra's video talks about the relegation of the female as form. What I mean is that in culture and the photographic image, the relationship of photography, aesthetics, form, and agency, she responded more broadly to the idea of gender bias. Sandra emphasizes the idea of women as seen as objects of desire. Kung we're talking about the male gaze. So the male gaze is predicated on the idea that women are objects of viewership and never an entity of agency. So critical to this idea was an emphasis that there is a gender that is an agent that creates photographic images, and there is a gender that is an object to the photographic image. So sinimplify ko na lang. And again, with the danger of being reductive, it is rooted in the idea of the male gaze. So and just to add further, so the body of a woman was, for Edward Weston and his wife Charisse Wilson, one of the only 3 perfect shapes in the world. The other 2 were the hull of the boat and a violin. So both are objects. No? The compulsion to choose such forms as perfect was understood within the formalist aesthetics of modernism. We must never speak of content. Siguro to emphasize, the woman was seen as an object to be photographed, not even a subject to be photographed. And again, the highlight on the form. So if you look at this image, it is a disembodied person. It's not even a person. It's a disembodied person. And therefore, therefore, it's an object. It's an object of desire. It's an object of observation. And the woman is reduced to a form to be captured. Kaya the entire idea of nude photography is also implicated. Well, that's me. So in a way, nude photography is implicated in this video as a tool wherein the male gaze is perpetrated and the relegation of a female to an object. If you're going to ask that, probably it's just all academic. But when you go to popular media, inclusive of that is advertising. You can see here an example, no? You have a woman wearing a bikini, naka-swimsuit, and then you have a phallic symbol here, which is the telephoto lens, and two smaller telephoto lenses here. And then there's a word here. Sabihin nyo, that's too much naman. Well, the title of the advertisement itself is indicative of the idea here, the semiotic message, or the signifier and the signified and the connotation and denotation. Sabihin nyo, I'm reading too much. No, it's written here. It's called the girl watcher lens. And it is an ad for a photographic equipment. And here you have a disembodied agent holding the phallic symbol, which is the telephoto lens, and an object of desire, which is the female form. So parang nangyari din dito, kahit na anong gawin mo, kung disembodied female form or a female with a face, they are still reduced to one object of desire, of spectacle. They are reduced as objects, basically. So yun yung point nito. Okay, so this is not Philippine photography, pero at least to substantiate the claim that photography in relation to aesthetics somehow points towards the idea that there is a predominance of the male gaze. So in this case, there was an ad in the US before, and I think you can search for this, no? So sa mga mas matatandang photographer, alam nyo to, the Miranda camera. So the Miranda camera, all their ads had a female form on it. And the reading of this is that, well, we can say that the female form is elevated to the status of what is beautiful. We can say that, I guess. But then again, we cannot deny the fact that this female form, even if you're saying that it's beautiful, is reduced to an object and a tool to sell a camera. So I think it's very hard to contradict that idea. That at least, I mean, I'm giving you an idea here, specific example. In this ad, so here you're selling photography or you're selling a camera. Again, in here parang nangyayari, photography as a discipline. Okay, you're selling the idea of photography. And then in photography, you have tools, and this tool is what used by a man, and then your subject is beauty, and here beauty is represented, or the signifier for beauty and what is aesthetically pleasing is a female form. It's a naked female form, and that's I also have to emphasize that the female form is not just it's naked, it's nude. Siguro depende kung anong gusto mo anong mas gusto mong term na gamitin, nude or naked. Basta here ano yan, so bare skin. Yan. So we can say it's bare skin na lang. O ano pang sasabihin? Di ba? So yun, so that's the ad. Sabi mo, one time hindi lang. That entire campaign of the Miranda camera was focused on the male gaze. So here, the man in the beach is fully clothed. You don't even see his face. And he's holding a camera. And he's taking a photograph of a female, of a woman, of a female. And as you can see now, there is an idea also here of projection. Kasi the idea of a pose and projection is your identity, or at least your form, is projected towards a viewer. That's the idea. Kaya po sinabi kapag nag-shoot tayo sa studio, sasabihin natin, diba, doon sa model, project, diba? Yun. Pag sinabi mo project, that is, that illustrates a visual phenomenon. When you say project, basically an image is demonstrated outwardly towards a viewer. You project something outwardly, diba? Wala nang project papasok, diba? So in here, you would see here, the female is projecting or posing her identity or her beauty, see it, towards a viewer, which is a faceless man, fully clothed in water and with a camera, fully clothed, fully covered. Even diba, that juxtaposition says so much already. Yun. And that entire campaign, again, nakalimutan ko, di ko pala nasama dito kung sino yung photographer nito. So yun, that entire campaign was built on the idea of a female form. And the female form being a tool to sell cameras and quote-unquote to sell photography. So yun. So in a way, it's also, we can also say that photography is seen as a male activity, wherein the male is the one doing the agency, and the female is part of photography as just an object to be photographed. So yan. So imagine niyo yan. So imagine niyo kung may gumawa nito ngayon, panahon natin. Diba? Okay, sa Pilipinas naman, since sabi natin, kailangan Philippines, no? So yan, simple lang naman. The White Castle whiskey calendars. Diba? So whether it's Avon, it's White Castle, La Tondena, beer. So probably, I'm not inventing anything. You can see here, the female form, diba, almost naked. Then you have liquor. And then you have ang interesting lang dito is that as compared to the advertisement a while ago, probably mga hobbyist photographers yung nakakita ng advertisement na yon. Here, this is something ethnographic in the sense that this is part of our everyday lives. So in every home, there is a calendar, or at least diba, predominantly in Filipino homes, you would have a calendar. And those calendars, assuming the demographic context of the Philippine population, probably the calendar would be something that is given free from the tindahan or the grocery. And if you're going to put something on your house, you would want to have something, well, number one, free. So that's good that it's free. But you would have something that is beautiful. So pwede mo makuha yung date, tapos meron ka pang beautiful picture. Pero here, embedded in that idea is that you have everyday experience denoted by numbers as calendars. And then this entire visual phenomenon of the dates and calendars and the everyday, you're going to check this more or less. Not every day, but at least you're going to check. If you need to check the date, you're going to look at the calendar. And it is also decorative in the sense that these things were posted in homes. If it was an ugly image, you will not, despite of that utilitarian purpose of a calendar, you will not put that on your wall kung hindi siya maganda. So aside from the utilitarian aspect of a calendar, which would denote time, diba? I mean, we can argue that time is a construct, but nevertheless, what we're saying is that we're denoting time. So there is a utilitarian purpose for a calendar. However, there is also something aesthetic about a calendar, which is there is a visual load here that is assumed as beautiful. Or else, hindi mo siya gagawing decoration. So parang the calendar is both utilitarian, but it is also decorative, diba? So when you look here, so you have the female form as decoration in your home. And it's ironic that in your house, there's also the wife and the daughters. And yet, they see this every day. Again, you're basing it on the demographics of who will use the calendar. I'm not saying, kasi syempre in the demographics of Philippine society, the rich people would probably not have this on their walls, diba? So the people who would probably use this are part of a certain demographic. Is that an engendering related to social status or social economic status? Yes, but I think there is existing academic credible knowledge that would support that idea, no? So it's not being pulled out of the ether na invento. So going back here, so you have your utilitarian purpose, you have your aesthetic purpose as something that is decorative, which is the beautiful woman, and then obviously you have your economic, there's something economic about this calendar in the sense that you are selling something, you're selling time, you're selling the woman, and then you're selling products. So there is commerce, there is a commercial aspect to a calendar, at least in the ethnographic Philippine context, di ba? Kaya introduce ko si Derrida as a source of, as a foundation, because we are now deconstructing something. And it's interesting that you have in the visual load of what is beautiful, there is something fantastical wherein you have that enchanted place wherein you have castles and then you have a horse. Kung in-stretch ko yung idea, anong relation ng horse sa babae? Di ba? There is parang symbol of potency, diba? And ano pa, diba? Siyempre, making iba, meron pang ibang connotations about what is a kabayo in relation to a woman, diba? So yan, there is something, probably something sexual also. Well, obviously this is sexual, and then you have a white kabayo. But nevertheless, because you have a white kabayo, kasi you have white castle. But then again, if you just need a castle, then have a white castle. Why do you need a horse? Diba? Kasi sabihin nyo, kasi white castle, I know yung white, but pero may kabayo, diba? So parang may something sexual, mayroong innuendos. Well, it depends on the reader, but at least siguro it's hard naman to contradict the idea of a calendar being an ethnographic artifact. There's something ethnographic. It's artifactual of our culture, and which points towards a certain social economic strata, and in relation to aesthetics and what we think is decorative, diba? Decorative and what is aesthetic and what is commercial. You're selling something. Diba? So at least yung 3 parts na yun, medyo mahirap naman kalabanin yun, diba? So sabihin nyo masyado akong nagbasa. So, and that idea, this is 1982, this is 1984. So there is a persistence of that symbol, that visual load, that visual message across time. And ironically, it's in a calendar. So time and persistence of an image is carried out through time, through a calendar. I mean, literally, no? So you have Carmen Martin, I don't know who's this girl. So probably sabihin nyo, hindi, part yan ng kultura. Kaya nga, what I'm saying is that the symbol is also held in time in the sense that there is historical context where we can ground that. Because when you go to, this is 2022, 2021, yeah. 2021, merong self-reflexivity na nangyayari. So for example, si White Castle, so I'm not sure what they did or kung sino yung nagbago yung management. And now you have White Castle whiskey, the same utilitarian purpose of a calendar. And then you have the idea of commerce. You're selling a product which is liquor, something alcoholic. And yet, the aesthetic changed a bit. The symbol of what is aesthetic or the signifier of what is aesthetic is now si Ninong Ray, diba? Si Ninong Ray na ginamit nila. And in this case, medyo jarring for many because, or matatawa ka, oh sige, if you're saying that walang gendering dyan, bakit ka matatawa in this photo and not in this photo? Or at least in this calendar, why do you have a different reaction to this photograph as compared to this photograph? That reaction that you're having is a contradistinction between what is the visual message of this and this message. You think this is funny. I mean, some of you would think this is funny, diba? So, and some would think, oh yeah, meron ng gender awareness in this photograph. Yes, but to a certain extent, it is demonstrated in a comic manner. Diba? Bakit hindi quote-unquote si Piolo Pascual? Bakit si Ninong Ray? Since sabihin natin mga model, diba? Yung the typology of the beautiful model. Eh kung if it's just about gender, then probably you should have a male model here. But why Ninong Ray? So meron din question doon. No? Pero I will not go into that. But I'm just saying some distinctions on this versus this. Because we can say na finally nagbago. But there is also a question that medyo may certain laro na ginawa din si White Castle na kailangan pa rin nila kasi mag-grab ng attention. And that rhetoric was not necessarily just through beauty. There is something comical about it. So it's Ninong Ray in the first place, diba? So well, I can say a lot of things about this, pero doon na lang muna. Okay. And then, so in 2023, that's 2021. Now it's 2023. Same brand, White Castle Whiskey. Nawala na yung male. Diba? Nawala na yung male. Nawala yung male. Nawala yung castle. Nawala yung kabayo. But now you again have a female. Pwede naman sabihin na it's still the female form. So ngayon, nagiging kakaroon tuloy ng issue na. So if you're looking at a female form, is it a persistence of gender bias or nilaro mo lang? In the sense na hindi ka naman naging gender aware. It's still a female. Ngayon, you're trying to elevate the idea of openness to a different form. Dati lahat puro slim. Ngayon, medyo mas full. I would say this is still sexy. But the question is, it's still female. So ngayon, now, where do we go now? So medyo interesting in the sense na binalik mo sa babae, pero now naman, the form is different because it's fuller as compared to traditional models na medyo mas balingkinitan. But still a female. So paano yun? So what assessment can we make of this calendar? Nawala na yung male, nawala na yung kabayo, nawala na yung castle. So how do we make sense of this photograph? And when we make an assessment of this photograph, it's going to be gendered. Diba? We can say it's beautiful. The woman is beautiful. And yet, that idea of something utilitarian, something decorative, and something commercial, it's still there. So ngayon, in the context of 2023, what can we say? Is it still the same kind of assessment that we made when we went here? From here to here and to here? Is there change? Is there something that is persistent? So yun yung mga questions na pwede natin i-ask to our experts. Okay. So since we're still in the female form, aesthetics, gaze, the play on the utilitarian commercial aspects or economic aspects of what is beautiful. Diba? So we think of something beautiful usually in association to the gallery or what is art. But obviously we know in our everyday lives that aesthetics also provides something that is more utilitarian and economic. The economic and the utilitarian, pwede mo siya paghiwalayan, pero usually they also come together with something aesthetic. No? So the question is, another expression. So the question is, Sir Roel is a photographer. Usually when you go to the camera groups, the camera clubs, na talagang yung org na camera clubs, and also the Facebook groups, may mga Facebook groups about photography. And minsan makikita niyo dito sa mga camera clubs. Well, this is not camera club, so I screen cap this from Sir Roel, no? And then you would see here usually yung invitation for the shoot. So gathering interest with the bikini shoot with Pamela from Brazil. And then you have a statistic. So height, diba? Yung lahi. Tapos, papakita mo sample pictures. And the idea is it's trying to gather interest. And if you gather interest, then basically you're inviting people to participate in photography. However, the question is, in that activity of photography, where is gender there? So where is the woman, where is the man, or where is the female, where is the male? Pwede naman natin sabihin na some of the people who will participate here are also female. They would want to see, what they would want to shoot someone, a beautiful woman in a photograph. Diba? Pwede naman natin sabihin yun. Pero yun nga, we're going to ask siguro our experts. So how do you make sense of this? I can make some conclusion, pero hindi naman sa iiwas akong mag-comment about Sir Roel, no? But this is something common. So so I think Sandra also mentioned this in our episode, no? Yung episode namin ni Sandra, wherein sometimes merong mga activities and assumptions and traditions in relation to gender that are carried on by institutions, by people, by individuals through a presumption of what is normative. For example, in here, this beautiful woman is being photographed. More or less, she's a model. It seems that she's a model. So if you're photographing someone who is a model who would want to expose their beauty, bodily beauty. So how do we make sense of this? What is the intention of Sir Rowell? Is he a misogynist, or is he just trying to enjoy photography? And in the participation in this shoot, just in case he gathers interest in here, so we have si Sir Vic, si Sir Ricky, hindi ko chinek kung may babae dyan. But nevertheless, kung may babae or lalaki, the question is, so how do we make sense of that? If, for example, we have a female participant, that is not the model. So the model is female, and then let's say sabihin natin kung one or two yung female dito, does it say anything? Or let's say sabihin natin, Sir Vic and Sir Ricky, so 52 na to kasi 50 plus 2. Let's say yung 50 na yun puro babae. Is there any conclusion we can gather or we can derive from that idea na let's say itong lahat ng 50 na to were female, the subject is female, and then nagkataon lang na si Sir Vic at saka si Sir Ricky yung nakita dito. So yun yung question. So we can ask that to our expert. Ano ngayon, in relation to a car show. So mapapansin niyo in most events, there is a female model. And then they are called ambassadors. Interestingly, yung term. No? So when you check the designation that some of the models take on, they call themselves ambassadors or brand ambassadors. So they are models for events. And interestingly, in most or if not all car shows or motor shows, there's always going to be a female model. And then when you go to other kinds of events, laging may female model or at least majority. No? In this case, there is a relationship of photography, an event about cars and bikes, diba? And commerce. And then there is a connection with having a female. There is a male, it says, there is a model, one of the models, Miss J.V. Malyari. So basically, that's J.V. Malyari. And to a certain extent, she carries out the desire for a certain product. Kasi that, parang nangyari dito, yung aesthetic value of this female form has an affective dimension wherein you associate a car which is also beautiful and functional, then you have a female model that invites you to go to the event. So yun yung questions. We can ask this. So if we are going to make sense of this, the connection of photography and gender in this photograph, then we can ask this to our experts. Okay, so since one of the critical topics in this conversation is the male gaze, so the idea now here is, for example, if a female or a woman is willing to be seen and she wants to be seen. Let's say if in case we're talking about the agency or at least the consent. Let's say let's not go to agency first. Let's go to the idea of consent. So if for example you have celebrities being public figures, they earn from it. So the tool that they use to earn their livelihood is something aesthetic. So your artistas would usually be quote unquote beautiful. But aside from celebrities, there are girls on TikTok. So sige, sa TikTok na lang. So let's say a girl on TikTok, medyo yun nga weird kasi mo, a girl on TikTok may presumption na already na that kind of statement engenders the woman. But nevertheless, yun, let's say that a woman wants to be seen on TikTok and that person is not a celebrity, gusto niya lang na makakuha ng likes. Probably not because of livelihood. Some of them would want to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be recognized, to be validated through beauty or through a dance on TikTok. If let's say that is the case, so how do we make sense of this? So what statements can we make if a woman who is not a celebrity, who is let's say beautiful and dances on TikTok, so there is agency. Again, hindi na to question of consent. I'm okay because kikita ako dyan, di ba? So yung consent. But there's also an idea of agency already. So if someone who is not a celebrity but wants to be validated, quote unquote. Well, kasi nga that idea of validation, medyo slippery slope. Paano mo sinabi na they want to be validated? Oh, let's say na lang, at least gusto nilang, they want to be seen and they also want to get likes or hearts. So, what statements can we make about it? So, I cannot make right now because hindi ko rin alam paano siya babasahin. So, should we tell them, no, don't do this? Or is it something na bound by historicity, meaning because it's 2023, TikTok doesn't have the same meaning already. So the visual modes are different, the cultural modes are already different, or I don't know. Kaya nga, let's ask our experts, no? But nevertheless, so yun yung question of the TikTok girls. So this one is different because they are celebrities. But when you go to, let's say, the TikTok girls, quote unquote, sorry for the term, who, because meron naman, ewan ko, siguro may TikTok boys, no? But nevertheless, kung sabihin natin, the TikTok girls, so they wear a certain kind of appearance, so through what they wear and the way they act, diba? The way they project themselves. So is it agency or consent, or is it validation? So what is engenderment that is happening in that conception? And if you have media like TikTok making that image accessible and even promoting that image to the general public, so what statements can we make about that phenomenon. Okay, yan. Sige, ito hindi na to questionable. As in talaga yung semiotically, sinabi na, diba yung, I think yung idea before about virginal, the woman in a marriage, photograph of someone very virginal, and then through the course of the ritual itself would show a man unwrapping, quote unquote, a woman. And obviously, it is also seen in the photographic image. Pero yun nga kasi pwede natin sabihin na, diba? Ano lang yan kasi it's part of the rites or the ritual. So now we go here. Siguro naman wala nang question to, no? So, mas explicit na to in the sense that you have a female form, you have Christmas. So you're talking about a celebration, and that celebration being represented by gift giving. And your gift is a female form, which is a woman. And the way the woman is presented is she's naked, she has a ribbon, and there's a spotlight on her. So sabihin natin, that's so misogynistic, diba? So when you look at this, syempre you can already make conclusions on the visual load that is being presented on what is gender. And when you look at this, you already know the instrumentality that is being made with the photographic image in relation to a certain gender. The question is, what if that photograph was made also by a woman? So this was photographed by Dar San Agustin. So Dar is a woman, and then she did this for this is for Playboy. So this is for Playboy. There is a demonstration, or there is a demonstration of the female form. There is an instrumentality to the way it was presented. The woman seems to be conscious, obviously, of that activity of photography. It's Playboy, naman the market of this. So we're talking about the male gaze, and yet your photographer is also a woman. So how do we read this? And that woman, Dar, si Miss Dar, also is the one who shot this. So Dar also had a series about Filipino goddesses. It's Filipino zodiac. So Miss Dar also had a project on Pinay zodiac. So basically, these are Filipinization of zodiac signs. And in the zodiac signs, hindi ko alam kung may lalaki. Pero so far, since Pinay zodiac, currently what I'm seeing is female. However, you would see here at the end, when you look closely, so transparent yung damit, yung top. And if we're going to ask about external biological traits, I think he is male. However, we don't know yung gender niya. It seems that this person, through the transparency of yung upper garment niya, is male. So, in this project of Pinoy Zodiac, which was shot by Miss Dar, and she posted it for Women's Month, and this exhibit was exhibited in the US. And this exhibit was, and this works is currently part of her portfolio. We're talking about this series. We're trying to put context in here that this is actually an elevation of what is Pinay. There is something powerful about the idea, the concept behind these images, because it talks about that is something, the idea of zodiac, Pinay, and so collab siya with Hela Pinay, so you can check Hela Pinay. So the question is, the person who shot this, the photographer who shot this, is also the person who shot this. So what statements can we make about gender in photography in relation to that? That in one project, we can say probably that Miss Dar is using a male gaze for a project, if we're going to use the male gaze. Kaya, to be honest, I didn't use I'll explain why I didn't use the male gaze kanina sa ating framework. And this is one of the reasons why I didn't use the male gaze, because it complicates things. I'll explain the principle why I didn't use the male gaze as a foundational idea for this talk. I used performativity. So we go here also, it's the same photographer, the image is different. So are we saying that there is a dualism on her identity, on Miss Dar's identity, being a woman? And again, the context of this was posted for International Women's Month. The title itself is Pinoy Zodiac. One of the persons here associated with the term Pinay, or at least the word Pinay, is probably a male. So through the biological traits, external biological traits, and yet she is included in this project as a representation of what is Pinay. And it's the same photographer. So how do we make sense of this in relation to gender in photography and Philippine photography? So I will need to ask that to our experts now. So when you go to follow nyo si Miss Dar, si Miss Dar is a co-faculty in the same school where I'm teaching. So she's a professional photographer. She's also a teacher. So when you look at these photos, how do we make sense of Philippine photography and gender representation, in the sense that Miss Dar is a woman, and then the kinds of photographs here would be sobrang varied. Kasi here, there is a form here. I'm not sure if this is a male form or a female form. You have something like this, na medyo goth. Well, siguro, for the lack of a better term, it's a bit more gothic. And I use the word gothic not in the pejorative again. So when I make assessment, at least I'm not stating that as a pejorative, meaning I'm not saying that as a bad thing. The goth aesthetics, no. So I hope you don't misunderstand. Well, if you have, no, we can't do anything about it. Again, the context of this conversation is that even ako ba, am I just trying to be mansplaining? Am I mansplaining to people? So medyo interesting din yung point na yun. Baka people will see, you're mansplaining, Tony. So let's see. Yeah, if I am, then let me know. I don't mind being told. I just want to know. For me to be for me to know and to be conscious about it, diba? And then whatever act that I do after that, then that's on me na. Diba? So let's say, and then here, so you have here two women, two females kissing, diba? So nangyayari, medyo nalito na ako ng konti dun sa labels, no? Pasensya na. So I apologize kanina, and I'm again profusely apologizing. Siguro baka ako yung may kailangan ng gender sensitivity class, no? But nevertheless, yun. And then here you have the form, the woman, female. So you can probably say that there's a certain exhibitionism here. Exhibitionism not in the pejorative again. Basically, I'm seeing exhibitionism as an outwardly performance or an outwardly demonstration to exhibit something. Yung exhibition is to be viewed. Yun. So parang exhibitionism not necessarily as an exoticized description, but something that is to be seen, an act to be seen. So that's what I mean by exhibitionism. So yun. Yan. Okay. So we have to ask this to our experts now. Syempre, I have my judgments, but given na I am not sure about my assessment, I will not keep it to myself. I will keep it to myself for now. Kasi nga, baka my assessment will be uninformed. Unlike kasi dun sa mga previous examples, I can stand by those comments, those readings. But in this case, medyo nahihirapan ako kasi, well, siguro may connection kasi I know Miss Darno. Pero aside from the agent herself, if you recognize that a body of work is composed of multiple works, and in multiple works, we can take that as a separate idea. It was a requirement for the project. I am not that. So let's see nga, diba? So yes, for example, in this case, so this is a female. It's for Playboy. Siguro naman medyo descriptive na yun. So yan. So let's see. That's also institutional. That is also quote unquote popular media in the sense that it's a magazine. So yun, for example, Playboy. So I think they still publish, they still print, but they have online. So that's popular media pa rin, di ba? Okay. Now we move into drag. So if we're going to use the male gaze here, medyo complicated in the sense that drag as an art form initiates being looked at, in the sense that drag is not necessarily an object that someone tries to acquire through viewing. In drag, you dress up and act in a manner that you are inviting people to look at you. In most literature, drag is seen or described as an art form, and therefore it is an outwardly expression of an internal phenomenon. However, that phenomenon from the inside being demonstrated outwardly invites people to look at it. So in this case, so in drag, how do we read this? So again, I said hindi ako expert sa gender, kaya medyo hirap ako dito. In the sense that I am not sure if they are males or they're females, because drag doesn't necessarily also presume a male or a female. Ang drag, ginagawa din siya ng cisgender persons. So in this case, so this is a poster for a show. So there's an entire activity that is televised or at least shown in Prime Video. And this is Philippines. This is not in other countries. This is Amazon. This is Prime Video in the Philippines. And then aside from the TV show, there's an event in SM Aura, Samsung Hall. So there's an entire economy happening here that is fueled by viewership, photography, and include mo na yung video, technology, media, and aesthetics, and expression, and gender, I guess, and gender. So now, how do we make sense of this? So how do we read this? Is it about consent? Is it about the male gaze? Is it about agency? Yes, I guess ang pwede kong mahila dito is that it speaks about agency. So regardless of how they're going to be seen, it's okay because the agency is coming from them. So that could be a good start, no? And that's the reason I'm going to explain why I chose performativity instead of the male gaze. But nevertheless, going here, in case also, if we're going to engender a certain appearance, since we all introduce appearance at the start. So these clothing, these garments are quote unquote coded female. A dress usually is coded as female or feminine. Sorry, again, I'm sorry for the incapacity to be precise. So, but nevertheless, so yan. So how do we make sense of this? So let's ask you now. Okay, just to substantiate at least an idea of drag. Again, I had to research because I also have some assumptions what is drag. No? Pero I had to research. So Connor Swendiman does drag, and she made a comics or illustrations of what is drag. And you can look for him. He does drag. So you can look for him online in his Facebook account. So meron siyang illustration. Pero I'll just highlight here one of the claims of Connor Swendyman. Sabi niya, drag is an art form. Kaya rin sinabi ko kanina na we can say that drag is an expression. You can read it here. And aside from it being described as an art form, Connor Swendyman also made a distinction or at least a clarification that drag is not necessarily for just one gender. So if you can read yung ano niya, yung material niya, sinabi niya na drag is for all gender identities. Some people even discover themselves through drag. So the thought bubble or the word bubble comes from a trans man, and then there's a trans man, but there's also a trans woman who does drag. It's coded female, and then you have a cis woman. Cis woman basically biologically as a woman, identity, expression. So we can go back dun sa the gender-bread person na illustration too. And the cis woman would be all taking women and female. So yun, so doon papasok. Yun yung cis woman or cisgender, yun yung straight as biological, and the identity that you take on also is aligned to your biological sex. So yun. So yun, we have to ask this, no? So this is photography in the Philippines. This is a photographic image. The market could be Philippines and outside, but the audience that is targeted is Filipinos, or at least Philippine context, kasi nga local. Ayan, kaya nga drag din Manila, Luzon. So, and then there's an event, and if you're going to have an event, probably you're inviting Filipinos kasi the venue is in the Philippines, di ba? And you have to see din yung price mahal up to 2.5. So may certain level of economic standing din, economic demographic and psychographic na hinahabol for this activity. Okay? And then we move on to ito yung galit na galit si Sandra, no? And I think hindi lang si Sandra, but because Sandra stated this in her video also. Ito yung mga medyo nakakainis in the sense na yung term ng lady shooters. So I know the guy who sent this. No? So, well, anyway. So again, I said what I'm going to comment on is what is public. So public knowledge, this was sent out by a staff of that brand. And ito, I cannot comment. Aside from the fact that yun nga, medyo I think, anong tao na, I think when he was saying this, he wasn't aware that this term lady is not being used anymore. Kaya nga in the earlier part of this lecture, I also said na yung congresswomen tinatanggal niya, diba? So representative na ang tawag. So para hindi siya gender neutral. And sometimes people still use congressmen, but it becomes more inclusive. Pero if you want to be neutral, it becomes representatives, diba? So ito, I think this is a limitation of his background talaga. So now we go here. Ito naman, hindi limitation ng knowledge nung nag-send, but a limitation on the language, on how he explained this. Pag sinabi kasi na there will be no monetary deals for this, to clarify, this is not just for the women or the female. This is the same for males. So the people you've seen in the poster, as far as I understand, it doesn't mean that they will not be paid. Ang mangyari lang, the payment will be on a per project basis. So itong there will be no monetary deal for this. I think this means that there will be no upfront payment. And ang mukhang sinasabi niya dito na we will create plans for you to be compensated, because that is also the same way the other ambassadors, the male ambassadors, will be paid. They don't have anything upfront. Well, kaya nga sabi ko nga, I'm trying to be careful because this is speculative in the sense that I'm not there anymore. I do not know what happened behind the scenes. No. Also, I'm not trying to absolve the brand. So just to clarify, I think this part means it would sound speculative kasi I wasn't there. Pero reading from what is written here, from something that is public, this means no monetary deal. But we will create plans for you to be compensated this year through online workshops and other photography engagement. For someone who has no idea, it seems that walang bayad. Pero to clarify, this only means that there's no upfront payment, because that is also the scheme for the male brand ambassadors. Prior to their ambassadorship, they are users, even before they were brand ambassadors. So they were not invited just because of their influence. So one of the ideas for the brand ambassador program is that it is not just a matter of influence. They are assessed with, number one, their expertise, which is also a corollary or the source of their influence. The expertise is the source of their influence because they're magaling. And thirdly, we choose them in relation to the relationship to the brand. So we have never gotten a brand ambassador that was not a Canon user. And before they joined the brand ambassador program, may tiering yan. So pagpasok mo, papartneran ka namin as Canon professional or parang a partner photographer. Kasi the Canon professional came around 2020 na eh. So even before, the relationship was not formalized, but the relationship was felt. This person has been using the brand for a very long time. And then that prompts us to talk to that person, invite that person, we check his or her work, and then we sign that person up as a brand ambassador. So there were no brand ambassadors who came into the program that came from another brand na pinirata namin. They are always users. So even if walang brand ambassador program, they would have been using the same brand. And the relationship with the brand has to be proven, not instantaneously. We monitor people. So at least I can speak for how I did it before. We evaluated not just because of influence, because that's cosmetic. That's too cosmetic. Brand ambassadors are assessed through their relationship with the brand, and brand ambassadorship, as far as the principle goes, at least for my time and the people before me, and I'm sure it was also applied in this round of brand ambassador program. It was founded on relationship and trust, na hindi after your contract palit ka na ng brand. So yun din yung iniiwasan, na after the contract papalit ka ng brand. Kaya we were very, very careful with choosing a partner. So it was tested through time, through relationship, through trust, through expertise, and then lastly is the influence. So yun, actually last yung influence, just to let you know. Pero if that is the case, are you saying na bakit wala bang babae na same sa description ko? There are, given that, well, later pala. So later I'll show, no. So the names that I left, when I left, I was also building later I'll explain. So kung question is wala bang babae, I'll explain later. Pero yun, nevertheless, itong idea of there will be no monetary deal for you, kasi this was highlighted by most people, the publications and people who were commenting about this program. So this one, I can't say anything about this. I think there was a mistake on the way it was phrased. Kasi hindi niya rin alam itong term na to, ito ginagamit. So, pero this was also the same scheme for all male ambassadors. So the compensation happens on a per project basis. Or kung meron mang upfront, parang signing fee lang. But then again, the foundation of the program was a relationship through time. And that relationship through time was the basis for choosing them. Influence was the last factor. Okay. So we go back to Ezra and also Hannah. No? So I think this was the comment ni Ezra on the apology statement. So ay mali, where's the, kasi this post by Ezra is in the comment section. I think parang 2 or 3 days after nag-post yung brand about the apology, no? So, and the apology seemed to be not an apology, but an excuse. It was posted around 1 a.m., parang ganun. So, nevertheless, I'm reading this, I'm showing this in relation to the previous slide. So, please do not take it out of context. I'm highlighting here the term lady shooters. And I explained, actually, hindi ko na nga sinama yung iba. Ito muna kasi yung lady shooters. Because we are in the topic of conventions. So conventional thinking, conventional mindsets or paradigms, persisting paradigms in the field of photography. There is an argument to be said that it is male-centered. If it's misogynistic, I think there is reason for that argument, but I am not going to make that assessment completely. So I think there is male centrism or phallocentrism, if you want to use the male gaze, no? Pero the assessment of the photography field to be misogynistic, in some aspects, I would agree. I mean, matagal naman din tayo, no, na I've seen naman the value judgments and the postures and the standards and also the approaches and also the entire paradigm, the entire attitude. So anyway, so yun. So yan, so ito yung ina-highlight ko dito yung where's the apology for failing to be inclusive in the campaign? Where's the apology for the insensitive and misogynistic remark of lady shooter? So yun. So, naku, ang hirap pala na pag sinabi ko pala to. Ibig sabihin nun, ako aware, pero yung people after me, were they aware? So again, I cannot add into the apology. So, but nevertheless, so since we're talking about conventions, so as a reaction to the previous slide, the term lady shooters, so Ezra highlighted that concern. That term lady shooters could be could be a result or a product of conventions, since there is also a presumption that in terms of participation, there are no women or very little participation of women. Well, in this case, not just women, but also non-binary people. So, non-binary persons. So, nevertheless, going back, so lady shooters, ito yung pinaka-concern ni Ezra. Well, mahaba siya, pero I'm just highlighting this in relation to the previous slide, that the term lady shooters was seen as insensitive and misogynistic. And I think I have to agree that it is insensitive and misogynistic if the reading is of, if we're reading it as a statement from the brand and not the staff. So kaya itong staff na to actually, I think misogynistic. I don't think misogynistic kung sa perspective ng staff. And siguro insensitive because hindi nga siya aware na hindi na to ginagamit. So, ang hirap nitong episode na to. So, ang hirap na episode to. Pero yun nga, another person who was vocal about this concern was Hannah Reyes or Hannah Reyes Morales. So, marami rin siyang sinulat, but I'm just highlighting this. In light of the clamor, they offered lady shooters, their words, not mine, no compensation opportunities. We are tired of asking for equal space to exist in the local industry. I would explain again that this part of no compensation opportunities, I think, is, I understand that this is the reading, that there's no compensation, but I think it seems illogical that there's no compensation, making it all the more, all the more disgusting. Imagine you're asking people to work without pay. So yun, I think, and I think that's right. The disgust is justified if you read this, no? So on my perspective, I do not know if it's true or not that there's going to be no compensation. If we read the message, it seems that there's going to be compensation, but it's going to be on a per project basis. And if I am going to speak from my experience, that is how we did it before. There is no upfront payment. We pay on a per project basis. So yun yung, I think, baka lang hindi rin na lumabas or hindi lang na-explain dun sa screen cap na post. Yan. So here, for you to be compensated this year through online workshops and other photography engagement, I think yun yung hindi na-explain ng brand, that they will be compensated on a per project basis but no upfront payment, because that is also how we did it before. Okay, so we'll go back to Hannah Reyes later because again,